I'm really, really fascinated to get your take on this one because this has been the conversation since Tuesday's franchise tag deadline. Baltimore Ravens placed a non-exclusive tag on Lamar Jackson like we talked about on the Monday podcast, just over $32 million for 2023. But what's going on here with this thing, Michael? Because shortly after the Ravens placed that tag, we see a number of teams, 5 of them to be exact. I believe it was the Atlanta Falcons, the Miami Dolphins, Carolina Panthers, Washington Commanders, and Las Vegas Raiders not come out with official statements, but through beat writers and reporters say that they're not going to pursue Lamar. What's really going on?
Well, I think what's going on is like, it's lying season, Femi. People lie. Like, how can you look at Atlanta with a straight face and say they're not interested in Lamar when they were on the meeting to fly with Deshaun Watson? How can you say Carolina's not interested when they were on the airplane to see Deshaun Watson? Like, seriously, those two teams were Atlanta was the favorite to get Deshaun.
Yeah.
Lamar's better than Deshaun, and it's cheaper. It's cheaper. It may not be cheaper financially, but it's cheaper in terms of draft compensation. And just for the record, I think part of this is for lowering the draft compensation. I think there's 2 factors going in play here. A, how do you deal with the mother and the player on a contract negotiation? Like, you need an agent when you're in this kind of arena. It's hard. It's hard to do this. Like, we would love to talk to the player, and then you got to negotiate with the team. Like, the Ravens could say to you, look, it'll take less than 2 1s. Okay, well, if we're not interested at 2 1s, we'd be interested at just 1 1. How much do you want to get rid of the player? I think that this is all engaged in conversation that usually you need an agent to kind of mediate this thing all together. And with Lamar not having an agent, I think it becomes really a challenging deal to get done. And how do you do that? Like, how do you get this done? Unless you fly to Florida and spend time with the mother and kind of walk her through all the scenarios that have to happen. I think Lamar's making a mistake. He needs representation to facilitate this. This is what agents get paid to do. It's what Dave Dunn's going to end up doing for Aaron Rodgers. He's going to facilitate this deal so everybody's happy. And I think this makes it very challenging for Lamar because like let's take the Raiders, for example. Like typically they would have to change their offense, and can they afford to pay the outlay? The other issue here is who wants to pay the over $200 million of guaranteed dollars? Who wants to do that? Who wants to duplicate the Browns deal? I don't think the Panthers would have ever done that deal. The Falcons would have never done that deal. That's how the Browns got in the deal. Remember, the Browns got eliminated from Watson.
Yeah.
How they got back into Watson was simply this: we'll do this deal. That's how they got back into Watson. It wasn't because he liked the brown jerseys or the orange helmets. They got back in because the cash. They were going to do this deal. So to me, I think a lot of this is the contract too, and how do you massage that around? I think the Ravens are just sitting there, and they'll say, okay, if you want to play football, it's $32 million next year, and that's what it's going to be. And we've managed our cap around that. It's challenging, but we've done it.
So the talk over the last 48 hours has been about collusion. That's the word that has been used. And whether it's a spoken or unspoken agreement, there feels like there's some sort of an agreement amongst the owners of we cannot let another player get a fully guaranteed contract. Do you think that's kind of what's going on here just a little bit? Whether it's stated out in the open, like I doubt they would ever just say it and text each other on a text chain because you can always track that. But it feels like there's something unspoken here that, hey, Deshaun got away with this last year. We can't let this become the precedent going forward once you get 2 guys on a fully guaranteed deal.
Because the rules don't favor it. If the Raiders have money, right? But who has the kind of cash to send to an escrow account and let it sit there? Unless they change the funding rules, the guaranteed contracts are always going to be hard to get in the NFL because the owners have to fund the deal. And that's not really a smart business maneuver. The funding law was put into effect in the 60s or the 50s so that these franchises, which weren't valuable, and these owners, which weren't billionaires and they didn't have yachts, would make sure they didn't cheat the players out of the money. And they've kept this rule intact. And I don't think it needs to be collusion. I just think they like the rule. I think they like it. And I think the other thing is because we have a hard cap, that when you guarantee this deal, you're stuck with it. You can't get out of it. You can't. And so it limits your flexibility with your team. You know, like if there's ever a player to have a fully buttoned up contract, it's Mahomes, and he doesn't have one. Like when they gave this to Watson, they changed the tenor of the league. They really did. And I don't think they did it. They did it to get back in, to get their quarterback, to get their desperation. I mean, this is how the Browns operate. I mean, they do things as if this is what they want to do. I mean, look, they hired a special teams coach, Bubba Ventrone, and I'm told reliably that Kevin Stefanski didn't even know they hired him. He was going to keep Prefer the whole time. So there's things that go on inside the Browns building that even the coach doesn't even know. Like Prefer thought he was coming back. At the end of the year, Prefer says he was told he was coming back. This is verified. And then when he didn't come back, and then they went out and hired Bubba Ventrone, and they said Bubba could bring players with them to come there. I mean, Bubba's talking to people at the combine, telling them, yeah, I can bring certain players with me here. I can help my special teams. But Stefanski wasn't involved with that. So like, who's involved? Who was involved with the Watson deal? Was it Andrew Barry? Was it DePodesta? I don't know. You know, so there's a lot of things. And so they've operated as kind of like one of their own companies. And I think that's changed the rules. And I don't think the owners want to get involved with that. I think they like the way the rules are set up. And I don't think it's collusion. I just think they like the rules.
I mean, was it just Jimmy Haslam that was pulling the strings?
I think they just, you know, this is what we're going to do. You know, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sign. You know, we want a better special teams coach. You don't want to change the coach. Okay, I'm going to change the coach. If you don't want to be the coach here, like to me, if Stefanski doesn't win next year, you know he's gone. I mean, they've already changed his coaching staff. So, like, and you know, Jim Schwartz is the new defense coordinator. Jim Schwartz and Paul DePodesta. If you've read the book Moneyball, Jim and Paul were really good friends. So I'm not saying Kevin didn't have an involvement with Jim. I'm sure he probably did, because I don't know that. But I do know that Prefer wasn't an involvement on the special team. So this Browns is kind of like a rogue. They got rogue elements within their own building. So when they give that contract out to Watson and they destroyed the framework of the league, I don't think the league was happy with it. I said it at the time, and I don't think it was what these other teams. And Bisciotti was one of the first vocal components of it. I mean, he was complaining about it. And, you know, look, I don't think Joe Burrow will get a buttoned-up deal, but Joe Burrow is going to get a good deal.
Yeah, and the point that you brought up about Steve Bisciotti is a really good one, because last year they were sitting in the situation of trying to work on a deal with Lamar Jackson. Then all of a sudden this Watson thing happens where he gets a fully guaranteed deal, and that throws a wrinkle into the Ravens negotiations, because then Lamar Jackson sees that and says, hey, I have a better resume than Deshaun Watson. I've won an MVP.
Of course he does.
Why can't I get that contract? Because so you understand where Lamar's coming from with this, given that he sees one guy who doesn't have the skins on the wall that he has get all that money. So he's going to say, hey, I deserve that money as well. And that's the crux of this whole negotiation. Now, on the other side of it with Lamar, because he is a restricted free agent on the tag, he can't legally talk to teams until the new league year on Wednesday. Do you believe that talks will start to ramp up and we'll start to hear some of these quote-unquote teams that were ruled out start to really get involved in the Jackson sweepstakes?
I mean, that's the hard part, right? How do you call mom directly? Do you call the text the player? Like, we're interested. Like, how do you do that? Like, I don't even know how to do that. Like, I would think if you're interested, you're going to want to have a face-to-face with Lamar and the mother and say, look, here, because this isn't about, we're going to give you a contract. This is about changing the franchise fortunes. This is about redirecting your franchise. This is about now you're going all in. You're saying, okay, for the next 4 years, we're going all in. We got to know the kid. We're changing because you got to change the offense, right? You got to change what you're doing. And you've got to have the owners got to be on board, the coach, everybody. So this is really this is a full redo, and everybody's got to be involved. And I think, to me, you got to have a face-to-face. This isn't, oh, by the way, we want to sign your guy. Let's start doing a deal. That's not going to happen. That's going to take a little bit more than that.
I mean, I feel like if you're one of these teams, I would imagine it's not hard to find Lamar Jackson's contact info. You can just give him a call and set something up.
When you get the agent, you know, every player on the free agency, they send out the list and who represents the player with the phone number. So you can call mama. But the problem is when you call mama, like, how do you gotta talk to the Ravens? You got to do with all that. I mean, you're going to call DaCosta on the phone and say, hey, look, how interested are you guys in doing this? You know, you're not just going to present an offer sheet. You know, there's a lot of legwork that has to get done. This isn't one of those where we're just going to stick an offer sheet in. That's kind of a different thing.
If you were the Atlanta Falcons or the Carolina Panthers, sitting in a division where we talked about on Monday, nobody is a world beater, would you do the deal, or at least try to do a deal to sign Lamar to an offer sheet that's fully guaranteed?
No, I wouldn't want to get in the fully guaranteed business, but I would try to. If I were Carolina, I would definitely do it. I think my defense is good. I play, even though we play outdoors, it's a fast track. I think we got a good enough team defensively around them. If I was interested in Watson, why wouldn't I be interested in Lamar? Yeah. I mean, it makes no sense, right? Like, how do you say that? I mean, Lamar's better than Watson in every area, as a runner. Now, he's been hurt the last 2 years. I get that. So you're concerned about durability. But same with Atlanta. I think he's perfect for Arthur Smith's offense. I mean, he's perfect for it. I mean, they did it with Mariota last year. So, and you were in the Watson thing last year, and you play in a dome, and you're guaranteed on carpet for 9 games at least every year. And then you got the Saints as 10, and you got Carolina and Atlanta and Tampa. That's 11 that you're playing in perfect conditions most of the time. So, why wouldn't they be interested? And then I would call DaCosta on the phone and say, look, we're not going to pay 2 number ones. We would pay, we're going to sign them an offer sheet. If you want to match what we're going to do, that's great. But, we'll give you a 1 and a 4, and then see what he says. See if they blink. Blink. There's no rule that says, you have to give 2 number ones. That's if you do it blindly, you have to give 2 number ones. But if you don't do it blindly, like say Miami signs them. Miami goes and calls DaCosta on the phone and says, we'll give you our 1 and 24. We'll give you our 1 and 25. That's the deal. Okay? Then that trade, then it's not an offer sheet. He signs his tender. And then the trade happens. You follow me?
Yeah. So it's almost like
that's the ground well for a deal. And so there's no rule that says unless he gets traded for 2 number ones, he can't go. That's not the deal. So you have some negotiation, you have some plyway here. And so to me, but again, you need an agent who's joined with you at the hip to kind of say, okay, look, we want your player. Here's what we want to do. Let's do a deal. So we're going to do an offer sheet that we know they won't match, and so that we can present it to them. Or let me negotiate with DaCosta first and come up with a deal, and then you and I can work out a deal. You follow me?
Yep. So
but there's a lot of things in play here, and when you don't have an agent in it, it's very challenging.
So it almost feels like, and sorry, I was cutting you off there a little bit, that if you work with the Ravens in this deal first, you can at least negotiate and work around the compensation for if you were to just sign him to the offer sheet. That's pretty much what you're saying here. It's like, hey, work with DaCosta and the Ravens and say, hey, you guys get him to the tender. We'll trade a 1, a 3, and a 4 and a 5 or whatever, and then we'll go ahead and then take him on and then sign him to the big extension versus let's just blindly do the offer sheet without you guys knowing, and then if you guys refuse to match, now we have to give up the 2 first-round picks.
Right, because you basically you need to take the temperature of the Ravens. How DaCosta's going to come out and say, "Well, we'll fully expect them to play." They're not going to get a deal done, right? Mm-hmm. Then he's going to say, "Well, we fully expect them to play on the tender." Well, I'm going to find out how much you fully expect that. Like, here's the best deal I can offer you, and then he's going to say, "Well, I have other teams." So all these teams that declare they're not interested, that's a smart play to declare you're not interested to get back in, so you let the other teams know nobody's involved, right? So DaCosta's going to come out and say, well, the teams are saying they're not involved, but they really are. I mean, that happens all the time. I mean, when we signed Andre Rison in Cleveland, which was a mistake, but we did it anyway, the Chiefs come out and say we weren't interested. I was in the office when Carl Peters negotiating with with Rison. I mean, I was in the office as Peterson's negotiating. A half hour later, he comes out and says, well, we were never interested. I mean, I heard the conversation. I was right there. Dr. Tucker and I were sitting in his office, And so that's what teams do. This, right? That's how they do it. So I think to me, you got to weigh that into effect. You got to be part of being a general manager is a little bit like playing poker. You got to see through it. Like, let's take an example here. Okay, Ryan Poles comes out and he takes the PR announcement in Peter King's column and says he's got 3 number ones on the table, yada, yada, yada. He basically takes the whole profile. If he had that deal, he would have done the deal. Mm-hmm. Right? He would have done the deal. Now, I understand he's calling around and he's trying to make it seem like he can move one level down, then move another level down. Yep. Like he thinks he wants to layer himself down. But who's moving up? Is Houston going to move up? I don't think Houston's ready to move up. Is Carolina ready to move up? Maybe, but Carolina may not want to move up right now. But clearly nobody has the three number ones on the table, or else he would have taken that deal. So part of the strategy is you got to play poker here a little bit. Like you got to call bluffs, and then a guy that's telling you he has a great hand, he doesn't have a great hand. Like have you ever seen the movie Rounders?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's licking the cookie when he tells you that. To me, what that article in Peter King was, he was licking the Oreo. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have it. Okay, did you see the video the other day? I thought it was so good, where Jerry Seinfeld is talking about
the Trey Lance one.
Yeah. The Trey Lance one. I mean, and then they put Lynch into it. It was brilliant, right? Yeah.
If he's touching his face.
And the higher up, he's lying more. Well, that's what you're doing as a GM. You're like, okay, who's after this player? What's my, who am I competing against, and move forward? I think to me, that's the case. And so I think you have to look at that and really gauge it. And so in this case, DeCosta's, when he put that non-exclusive on him, he basically said, call me. That's what he did. He took an advertisement out and said, call me. Yep. Please call. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to have him play for him next year at $32 million, but that's probably worst case scenario.
I didn't know we were going to have Ryan Poles as Teddy KGB on this episode.
Well, he's trying to be Teddy. Pay the man his money. Yeah. Pay him his money.
Just splash in the pot.
Check.
We're splashing the pot here on the GM Shuffle. Thanks for watching the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. And for more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to VSiN Live and the GM Shuffle podcast with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN, wherever you get your podcasts.